Your take on the enemies list?
Well, I'm sure they have an enemies list. They have more than that. I think they actually have departments in the White House. There was a report coming from some people in Canada who had figured out that there was a special department of the White House which dealt with the birth certificate issue raised by Phil Berg and others, and that was all it did. And I'm sure there's another one there for the Larry Sinclair issues and everything that goes with that.
That's what the news says, and I want to make a correction interrupting. It's Lamar Alexander, Lamar Smith. I get names turned around. It's Senator Lamar Alexander. Go ahead.
So they do have an enemies list. Now, in terms of the Obama deception and now the fall of the Republic, the Obama deception in many ways is the preparation for breaking the spell, for dispelling the magic, for bringing Obama down to earth. I guess it must have come out in May, right? And then
March.
During the summer, it had a tremendous impact. And what you saw then in June, July, August, in terms of a populist rebellion of leftists and rightists against Obama, because it was both. You had old people who said, I want my Medicare. That's my Medicare from the New Deal and the Great Society, and you take your hands off it, Obama, because you want to give the money to Wall Street, what he really does. So a broad consensus around that. Now, the question is now, with the fall of the Republic, my ambition for the fall of the Republic is this should lead to gridlock in Washington. We have two parties of scoundrels and incompetence. They're corrupt, they're stupid, and they have all of these plans that we've been documenting. The only possible perspective right now is we want gridlock. We don't want any changes. I don't want the changes Obama wants, and I don't want the changes the Republicans want. So let's have gridlock. Let's have these institutions be paralyzed for the moment.
But let me ask you, Webster, what should I be doing, because I really respect your perspective, what should I be doing being on the top 25 enemies list of the White House? I mean, that's pretty creepy.
Well, that's a badge of honor, of course. Congratulations. That's excellent. Again, the main thing I think is to get into this idea. The Obama health care reform is a monstrosity. However, there's a grave danger that Obama and the Republicans could make a deal. The one thing they could agree on is they could say, let's destroy Medicare. Let's take $500 billion out of Medicare. Let's strip the American people of their economic rights. Let's also destroy Medicaid in the process. And this is something that some Republicans have said, that they could see common ground with Obama when it comes to stripping away the economic rights of the American people.
Let me add this, and we're going to get into the dollar, because you're absolutely right. When I was in an airport last Wednesday and bought this Wall Street Journal I'm showing people on TV, Wednesday, October 14th, headline, Insurers Stand Against Obama Committee's Plan. And excuse me. And then in the article, they have the spokesman for the healthcare insurance lobby. It says he's the head guy who speaks for them. You know, I guess from the papal seat, or however you'd put it. And he's there speaking for them, and he says, we wrote this bill. We wrote the takeover of healthcare, and we want bigger fines if you don't come get our insurance. We want liability protection so they can basically get more money, make you get their insurance, then lower the care, everything you said 6 months ago. But then when you watch the mainstream news, the controlled left acts like, oh, insurance companies who are greedy and bad, which they are greedy and bad in many cases, they don't want this bill when they wrote it. Now, because of pressure, stripping the fine if you don't get it, and stripping a lot of this corporate welfare, now they're threatening to back out of what they wrote. So every time these fake George Soros leftists who just want a new tax on health care to pay to the banks, every time they get cornered, they come out and say, oh, people that don't want this government health care plan, you know, they are working for the health care industry. It's the big health care fat cats that are behind this, Webster.
There's also this question about what they call the mandate. In other words, that every individual is forced to buy insurance from a for-profit private health care company, which is what it's going to be. It's a for-profit, deregulated company with 33% overhead, with executive perks, golden parachutes, lobbying budget, advertising budget. The interesting question is, how can that be constitutional? How can the U.S. government coerce anybody into buying something from a private company when they usually say, well, you get insurance for your car? Fine. An automobile, you can get a driver's license without insurance. It's, do you want to put a car on the road then many states require liability insurance. This is not the same thing. What Obama's basically saying is just because you're there, because you're alive and breathing in the United States, you're going to be forced to go to WellPoint and Blue Cross and give them, 13-15% of your income. I don't see how that can be done constitutionally. I think there's a real constitutional barrier to that, because otherwise I'm being forced to buy something from a private company. This makes no sense.
Absolutely. Okay, so whether it comes from Republicans or Democrats, either way, it's special interests trying to loot people because the system is so corrupt. Any way you slice it, they're involved in a fraud. We'll have you back up soon to talk about that. Let's shift gears in the time we have left, Webster. The global economic crises that over 10 years ago you wrote your economic tome on. We actually sell the latest edition of that at Infowars.com for people that are interested in surviving the economic cataclysm. It's happening just as you broke it down. What are we dealing with? Open G20 announcing world government. Carbon taxes will pay to them. Just a planetary dictatorship run by a bunch of Madoff, Ken Lay types. Where do you see all this going?
Well, I hope very much that this Copenhagen conference, which they want to impose this yoke, they want to crucify humanity on a cross of carbon in Copenhagen in December. I hope that's going to be a failure, and there are some pretty powerful forces that are making it a failure. China and India have had joint meetings where they say we will not be bound by this insanity. We will not be stifled and strangled and frustrated in our economic development because a bunch of rich elitists in London and New York decide that they have some carbon phobia, carbon fetish, whatever it is. So I think there's a very good chance that the Copenhagen conference will blow up, that it'll be a monumental failure. I urge everybody to do everything in their power, especially around the world. Make sure that Copenhagen conference is a failure. Again, gridlock. We want gridlock. That's the only possible outcome that saves humanity under these conditions. Now, the other thing is the dollar crisis that you mentioned. Today, the dollar is very weak. It's $1.50. It's more than $1.50 to buy a euro. That is very close to an all-time low, and it's certainly a 14-month low. The dollar index is below 75, which is quite dramatic. And at the same time, this is the kind of thing that gets you into the geometry of hyperinflation. You've got oil is up to almost $82 a barrel. So oil has gone up, certainly more than 10% just in the last 5 or 6 days. So I think what you're heading for now is some kind of a dramatic moment. Hyperinflation takes off slowly, and then it gathers steam, and I'm afraid we're now in that kind of an area. One thing that I would warn against, the British. Remember that when you get a situation now of latent crisis, a crisis that it's about to explode, the British specialty is to try to precipitate the crisis, to break it out in the open in such a way that they can export the depression to others, to the U.S., to Europe, to Japan, whatever they can do. This Robert Fisk article in the London Independent has been, I think, characterized by the RIA Novosti news agency as a plant by George Soros designed to create a dollar panic and to prevent any rational form of monetary reform. It's just what the British do. They did it in 1931 when they went off gold. They did it in 1971 when they brought down Bretton Woods. They did it in 2007, 2008. They're trying to extort $6 billion from Iceland.
So this does signify that the Anglo-American power elite are wanting to cause a global currency crisis now for a massive change.
Yeah, some of them are. Again, the more British side and the Wall Street side, but there may indeed be countervailing forces on that too. So look at the article by Vlad Grinkovich on RIA Novosti attacking Robert Fisk as essentially somebody who's a speaking tube for George Soros. Obviously, it is impossible for the dollar to remain as the sole reserve currency. That will not work. On the other hand, most of the other candidates for this are even less qualified. The euro and the yen, I think, are even less able to do this job than the dollar. And the worst of all possible worlds is this idea of a synthetic currency. The idea that you'd create a supranational currency. It would probably turn out to be special drawing rights of the International Monetary Fund. That's the worst. That is what Lord Keynes wanted at Bretton Woods. Lord Keynes, of course, spokesman for British imperialism. He wanted this thing called Bancor, which would have been just a strangulation of world development instead of Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods worked very, very well. Between 1944 and 1941, 1971, we had the best rates of economic development in world history before or since. We should, I think, go back to the positive features of Bretton Woods, not all of them, but the ones that proved to work well. But certainly no Bancor, no special drawing rights, no supranational currency, and above all, watch out for British sabotage as this crisis gets worse.
All right, I want to talk about how you see this unfolding on the current course that the establishment has us on. What some of those different forces that are moving towards world government and vertical integration, but maybe debating about who's going to be on top of the pyramid when this all settles. We'll talk about the final timeline and then launch Fall of the Republic straight ahead.